Can I have someone to read out the last part of the seventh plague there in Revelation 16? Revelation 16. Um, sorry, the last part of the sixth plague, Revelation 16, verse 15 and 16.
Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth and keepeth his garments, lest he walk naked and they see his shame. And he gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon.
Hmm. Now, last time we covered a bit about Jesus' declaration that he's coming as a thief here. This is his announcement that his coming is drawing close, is right at the end of these seven plagues, and we see that in the next one. But while Jesus is preparing to come back, we see that the enemy's doing his last desperate defiance, act of defiance against God, and going forth to gather the world together to the battle of the great day of the God Almighty. And it mentions it's called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. Now, something that's interesting about the word Armageddon, there's actually no place in the Hebrew tongue that's called Armageddon. I mean, there is a city called Megiddo, one of the ones that Solomon built and fortified, covering the plains of the Jezreel Valley. However, it's not on a mountain, which is what Armageddon means in Hebrew. It's the mountain of Megiddo. I will share um, a couple of pictures I got here of Megiddo. Because this is one of the places I went and saw when I was over in Israel, and I found it quite interesting. Now, that city there is Megiddo. It's called Tel Megiddo. A tell is this big mound that it's on. Now, something interesting to note is that when the city was originally built, there was no hill there. It was built on the flat. Um, but what happened back in those days, that when the city was destroyed, they didn't get rid of all the rubble. They actually just brought in dirt, packed it down, made it flat, and then built the new city on top of the old one. And a place like Megiddo has a hill that high because it's been destroyed and rebuilt over a dozen times. And every time it got destroyed, they built it back in that same place because it was such a key location. You know, being destroyed so many times over the course of biblical history, sort of shows a bit of significance of why it speaks about great battles being held there, because it was a major fort that was the center of a lot of conflicts and battles. And one of the reasons is, here's another picture of it, but you can see how flat the land is out there beyond Megiddo. That is the Jezreel Valley. And if I pull up this map here, you can see this little dot here is the town of the city of Megiddo, and this flat area through here is the Jezreel Valley. So in Israel, you've got all mountains all up here and all up here, but in that valley was where most of the food production of Israel was held. So it was quite a significant location to keep safe or to attack if you're an invading army. So Megiddo was the center of a lot of battles that were key for controlling this area. And so because of its position there, guarding the Jezreel Valley, and historically its significance in taking place in so many of these battles, it seems like that's why here it is being used as this place for the final last stand. Now, can somebody read Revelation 16, verse 17 to 21? We'll have a read over the final plague.
And the seventh angel poured out his vial into the air, and there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne, saying, "It is done." And there were voices and thunders and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. And the great city was divided into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And great Babylon came in remembrance before God to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. And every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. And there fell upon men a great hail out of heaven, every stone about the weight of a talent. And men blasphemed God because of the plague of, of the hail. For the plague thereof was exceeding great.
So what events do we see taking place under this final plague, under the 7th plague? What are the significant things that happen? What are some of the things that stand out to people? Galen.
It seems to be that the voice in verse 17, the voice that says it is done, is the catalyst for the rest of the events. That's the starting point to say, right, the rest of these things now need to take place. That's what it seems like. And obviously this one, being the last plague, is there's quite a lot going on.
Well, the question we have then is who is it that's speaking? Who is it that says it is done?
The voice comes out of the temple. So a priest officiates in a temple.
Can you read for me Revelation 15 verse 8?
15:8?
Yep.
15:8. And the temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power, and no man was able to enter into the temple till the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were fulfilled.
So at the beginning of these plagues, we see the glory of God fills the temple and no one's able to enter into it. So if this voice is coming out of the temple, it's the voice of God speaking and declaring this statement.
It comes from out of the temple and also from
Yeah, and from
the throne. And
this
I
is the
think
Father
that might be
speaking.
that might be the key thing. If it's coming from the throne, then would it not be coming from the Father? He's making a declaration that it kind of, I don't know, booms through the temple, as it were.
Mm-hmm. And as well, accompanying that, you hear the thunders, the lightnings, the great earthquakes. This is the same thing that we saw when God spoke the Ten Commandments. These same things accompanied his declaration then, and now he's declaring it is done, with a voice so powerful that his voice is causing these thunders, lightnings, and a great earthquake. Now we see in verse 20 a few things described there. Every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. This is the second coming language. This is what we've seen elsewhere in Revelation 6, when Christ is returning through the skies. The islands vanish below the seas, mountains are removed out of their place. The elements burn with fervent heat, as Peter says, at the coming of the Lord. So in the seventh plague, we see these events that take place in the second coming of Christ. And also, it mentions great hailstones, some plague of hail, the weight of a talent. I can't remember if we actually touched on that last week. But I remember looking at it, and there's variations on how much a talent weighed, but roughly they're sitting out to be about 30 kg. So I got my calculator out and tried to work out the size and the speed these hailstones would be traveling. And I worked out, you just imagine like a 30 liters, like you get those big 20-liter buckets, 1.5 of them, you get a ball of hail about a foot in diameter, a bit bigger than that. And it'd be traveling at near 180 kilometers an hour is how fast it would be falling from the sky. And you can just imagine a plague of hail like that sweeping across a city. It wouldn't be much to stand in its way. Galen.
I mean, even now we see, hailstones the size of, baseballs, or a softball, depending on where you are, obviously. And yet they can strip a tree. They're of branches, obviously the smaller branches where the leaves and stuff are, but they can still strip that fairly quick. And you see the damage on TV with the cars, all holes in it and dents and all the rest of it. You wouldn't want to be out in the open with that, let alone something, and that's only, minuscule compared to something that's, maybe twice as big as a basketball. That says something, and the fact that they're traveling the same speed as the small ones we get now for terminal velocity. No, definitely not. Don't want to be around for that.
So all these things are happening under this plague, but what is sort of the main focus? What is the thing that is centered on here and brought up in the middle of this seventh plague? What is the focus on? What is the focus of these judgments?
Babylon.
Mentions there, great Babylon came in remembrance before God to give her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. It's the final judgment and destruction of Babylon. All the warnings that we've looked at so far in the book, warning against Babylon. And here Babylon gets its final comeuppance.
Is the great city Babylon, or is that referring to something else?
In context, it would seem, well, in one sense, it does seem to be Babylon. Babylon was the great city that ruled over the kings of the earth. And you see that later in chapters 17 and 18, particularly when the kings of the earth and the merchants are weeping and crying for the destruction of Babylon. You know, it is that great city that rules over the kings of the earth. But yeah, it's not just Babylon that's suffering under this, because it talks about the great city was divided into three parts, and the cities of the nations fell. You know, up until this point in the plagues, you know, there's been lots of plagues, lots of being poured out, the boils, all waters turning to blood, the sun scorching. You know, all these things are happening. The people are suffering and still blaspheming God under. But here you've got all the cities of the nations. They've finally fallen. They've all been destroyed in this, you know, massive earthquake that absolutely destroys everything. And so God's finally getting round to answering the prayers of the saints that were crying out for justice, that we saw before in chapter 6. And the saints that were, you know, called to endure with patience the things that are coming up on the earth. Now they have, and now Babylon's come up in remembrance before God. And so that seventh plague is the final destruction of Babylon. And that brings us into chapter 17. Now, I wanted just to notice a bit about the structure of what's happening here. That seventh plague talks about the destruction of Babylon. Babylon's coming up in remembrance for God, and it's going to be destroyed. But can somebody read from me Revelation 17, verse 1 and then 5?
And there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth.
So what's John being shown here, or what are we being introduced to at the beginning of chapter 17? What is the scene that we're seeing? Shailene.
Punishment.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like they've said about, like in verse 19, it talks obviously about the destruction of Babylon, and then it's almost like he goes into the whys and wherefores about Babylon and who actually Babylon is, or who who it represents, and why, or her, what she's done, what her state is, as far as just evil, yeah, and the whys and wherefores around that.
Mm.
It's like we had earlier, was it at the end of chapter 6? Yes, who shall stand? And then chapter 7 is an interlude to say, well, these are the ones that are going to stand. Is it kind of like that, where we're introduced, this is what Babylon's doing, there's a statement made, and then chapter 17 goes into, well, this is why that statement was made. Is it like a
Yeah, it's zooming in on the punishment of
Yeah.
interlude?
Babylon.
Yeah.
As you
So
mentioned,
I made a really short statement long, sorry.
yeah, he says, I'll show you the judgment of the great whore, who's one of the names on her forehead is Babylon the Great. So under the 7th plague, we saw the great Babylon has come from the remnants. God's going to destroy it. And then chapter 17 opens up with one of those 7 angels that had the 7 plagues, telling John, now I'm going to show you this judgment of Babylon, the judgment of this great whore, the judgment that you just got a brief summary of under the 7 plagues. And he goes on to first describe and identify who this woman is riding the beast, and then speak about her judgment and her destruction that happens at the end of chapter 17, where we read in verse 16 that the kings of the earth give their power to the woman on the beast, and it says in verse 16, and the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God hath put it into their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree to give their kingdoms unto the beast, until the word of God shall be fulfilled. And it says, and the woman which thou sawest is that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. So that woman is Babylon. And chapter 17 starts out by identifying her, finishes with John being shown her judgment. And then following on from that, in chapter 18, we've got, again, it's repeated 4. Let's say it goes back to, I'm out of Babylon, that you be not partakers of, that you be not partakers of her sins, that you do not receive of her plagues. And then if we jump down in chapter 18, can somebody read for me verse 9 and 11?
And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning. And verse 11.
11, yep.
And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise anymore.
So again, chapter 17, we see the description of Babylon, the destruction of Babylon. Chapter 18, here we've just seen all the kings of the earth and the merchants that were not Babylon, but a part of that system, that were profiting off it, that were supporting it, weeping and lamenting at its destruction. But then at the end of that chapter, into chapter 19, in Revelation 18:20, we read, "Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her." We have that this God's people are triumphing, that God has come down and delivered them. And then in chapter 19, in verse 2, it says, "For true and righteous are his judgments, for he hath judged the great whore which did corrupt the earth with her fornications, and hath avenged the blood of his servants at her hands." And so that's still in chapter 19. It's still going on, speaking about this expansion of what happened and the aftermath of those 7 plagues. And of course, chapter 19 carries on after that to speak about Christ returning as the rider on the white horse at the second coming. And then chapter 20 opens up with the 1,000 years. So everything in chapter 17, 18, and 19 sort of fits in under this 7th plague, this Babylon coming in remembrance before God and being destroyed. Not, I should clarify, it's not everything fits into that single time frame, but everything is about expanding on that. Sometimes it goes back to describe things that happened earlier in the lead up to it, but it's all for the purpose of explaining to us the judgment Babylon receives under these plagues. Now, can somebody read for me Revelation 17, verse 1 to 6?
And there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-coloured beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet colour, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints, and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration.
Now, there's a whole bunch of stuff happening there. But probably the first thing I want to look at is we've got this picture of this woman riding the beast. And I want to look at some of the descriptions of the beast that we see here first. How is that beast described? What are the features that this beast has that she's riding? Galen.
He's scarlet coloured.
Mm-hmm.
In verse 3, he's scarlet coloured. He's full of names of blasphemy. He's got 7 heads and he's got 10 horns, which is reminiscent of a certain book in the Old Testament.
Hmm. Well, yeah, it does have some references to Daniel, but even without going back to Daniel, where else do we see this in Revelation?
We've got the beginning of oh, it's the sea beast.
Hmm. Do you
The
want to
beginning of chapter 13.
read that out? Revelation 13, verse 1.
And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy.
Hmm.
He's got crowns. This one doesn't have crowns.
No,
Well-
it doesn't. This is one of the interesting things about this beast. It sort of looks the same, but there are a few things that are different. One is you mentioned no crowns, but another is the question is who was the beast in Revelation 13 when we looked at that? Who did we identify it as? Who was the beast from the beast from the sea in Revelation 13?
Rome, the papal powers.
Yeah, the papal powers. But if it's the same beast here in Revelation 17, then who is the woman that's riding the beast? Because we say in a woman represents a church, and we see that throughout Scripture. You know, when we looked at Revelation 12, verse 1, you know, the woman there, clothed with the sun with the moon under her feet and 11 stars. In Ephesians 5, it talks about, you know, the church as being the bride of Christ, and we see that again in Revelation 19. The woman represents a church. It's throughout the Old Testament as well. So here in Revelation 17, we've got a woman riding the beast. So we've got this idea, this church, you know, an apostate, unfaithful church that's committing fornication with all the kings of the earth, not being faithful to God at all. It's riding the beast, this political power. But back there in Revelation 13, that beast was the papacy in its heyday, that was both religious and political in the one power. So that's an interesting thing. That there are parallels that it looks like it's pointing back to that, but there are also these differences. We also see this description appearing back in Revelation 12 as well. Can somebody read for me Revelation 12, verse 3?
And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads.
So there we see that Satan is presented as this red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns. And we saw that was Satan working through pagan Rome. And then the next beast in Revelation 13 is again Satan working through papal Rome. Both being depicted there as 7 heads and 10 horns. But interesting that Galen brought up the idea of the crowns before, because in Revelation 12, the crowns are on his heads. In Revelation 13, the crowns are on the horns. in Revelation 17, the crowns aren't there.
Mm.
So that gives us indication of how it's moving through time.
Okay, 'cause they're
Um,
democracies now.
And again, this takes us back to, as Galen mentioned, the visions of Daniel that have these 4 beasts, which have in total 7 heads and 10 horns. And there it takes us from, Rome was the last of those beasts. And so when Revelation 12, when Satan's depicted there working through Rome, the crowns are on their heads because it's the last one of those nations ruled. In Revelation 13, we're moved on to the time of the divided Roman Empire, where Daniel 7 talks about the 10 horns come to reign and the papacy arises from among those. So in the time of Revelation 13, the crowns are on the horns. And now in Revelation 17, the crowns aren't there. And so that's another interesting point with this beast. So that brings us to the point where we have to ask the question, what are we going to make of this beast then? Because it's similar to those beasts, but it also has these differences. And I'm going to put this to you, and we're going to read another verse in Revelation 13. I want to see what you think. That this beast is not the beast from Revelation 13, but it is in the image of the beast from Revelation 13. I mean, we can see clear differences, but I think looking at it that way makes this make sense. Revelation 17 is depicting the image of the beast. And that's why you see it being described looking the same as the previous beast, because it was in the image of it. Yet it's not that papal power, because we have this woman riding the beast. The religious power is riding and controlling the image of the beast. And if someone can jump back into Revelation 13 and read for me Revelation 13, verse 15 to 16.
And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads.
So according to Revelation 13, who is the final beast power that does this final death decree? Who is or rather it would say, who is the final player, the final actor on the part of Satan?
Well, that looks very much like the second beast, doesn't it?
Yeah, the beast that comes up out of the earth. But what is the final act that beast from the earth does? There in verse 15, what does he do?
Speaks and causes as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed.
Yeah, the beast from the earth, his sort of role in here is to give life to the image of the beast.
Oh, right.
So we've got the beast from the sea, Then we've got the beast from the earth, and the beast from the earth, his job is to give life to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should speak and cause those who don't worship the image to be killed. And so Revelation 13 there shows that the final power that actually enforces all this stuff is the image of the beast. And so there in Revelation 17, when we're shown this final power, he says, I will show you this, that great hall that will receive this judgment under the seventh plague, that has made itself drunk with the blood of the saints. This is the image of the beast. And so that's why it's not the papacy that we saw in chapter 13. It's the image of that beast that's been made and given life, that it would go and persecute.
So looking at it in that context, the crowns are null and void because they're all claiming to be democracies now.
Yeah. Indeed. And so that's looking at the beast. Now I want to look at the woman. The woman that's riding this beast. Now, what is she described as doing? Because there's two things. There's her appearance is described and her actions are described. First, I want to ask the question, in those first 6 verses that we read, what is the things that she's been doing? Galen.
Well, according to verse 6, she's drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs. So she's obviously been very busy with persecution.
Mm-hmm.
But when we go up further to verse 2, she's been busy committing fornication with the king. Well, actually, no, the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. Hang on, with whom? Yeah, the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. So she's been busy in that department. And the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So she's been busy handing out wine, obviously, to the inhabitants of the earth, and she's been busy with the kings of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
So when you've got kings and inhabitants, that pretty much describes the whole population of the earth.
All the rulers and the followers.
Yep, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And also the ones that she has persecuted, who she's been busy with them persecuting them as well. So that pretty much covers everybody.
The leaders of the world, all those in the world that are just followers, and all those who resist and stay faithful to God. And it describes how she's acting and treating all of them. Now, how is she described as looking? What is her attire? And what are the significance of these things that she's being described with? Aileen.
She's got she's obviously dressed out in particular colours, in purple and scarlet, and she's decked out. She's all prettied up. She's all fancied up. And she's obviously got a cup in her hand, which she's I would dare say probably proud of. But she's also got a big label on her forehead. She's got a description of her character, what she's like, and yeah, I suppose that would be the equivalent of when lepers used to have to go around saying unclean, unclean. They would announce themselves. This is announcing who she is and what she's like.
Now, in those colors she's described as having, purple, scarlet, two colors decked with gold, precious stones and pearls. Now, I'm going to look at a few verses because a lot of these colors are actually quite significant in what they're representing. Can we just read Judges 8 verse 26? And the question is, what does the color purple represent here?
What verse, sorry?
Judges 8 verse 26.
Oh, 26. And the weight of the golden earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, beside ornaments and collars and purple raiment that was on the kings of Midian, and beside the chains that were about their camels' necks.
So who's there is described as having purple? And what type of color is purple? Yeah, thank you, Ian. Royalty. We also see a similar thing in the passion scenes of Christ when he was arrested and taken to court. That they there in Mark 15, they clothed him with purple and put a crown on his head and mocked him, and saluted him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Yeah, and that they were mocking him as being a king, and they gave him a crown and dressed him in purple. Purple represents royalty. The other question, what does gold represent in scripture? Do people have any ideas? on that, what gold represents?
Divinity in the sanctuary?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Isn't it referred to as faith in Revelation or something?
Yeah, well, in Revelation 3, verse 18, when Jesus was speaking to the Laodicean church, he says, I counsel of thee to buy of me gold tried in the fire. And it's that idea of that, that faith that's purified. I'm going to read a verse out from Exodus 28, verse 36. Speaking of the priests, the priest attire, it says, and thou shalt make a plate of pure gold and grave upon it like the gravings of a signet, holiness unto the Lord. And it carries on, and thou shalt put it on a blue lace, that it may be upon the mitre, upon the forefront of the mitre shall it be. So I find it interesting that the high priest also had something written on his forehead, well, on a golden plate that was attached to the front of his mitre that he wore. And the gold was there to be inscribed with holiness to the Lord. What about red? Or scarlet? Where else do we see that? What does that represent? Yeah, Ian, is that the shedding of the blood? Yeah, it's actually used to both speak about our sins. In Isaiah 1:18, it says, "No, though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be white, although they should be, red. Sorry, white as snow, they be red like crimson. They shall be as wool." But at the same, so in that sense, because our sins require blood, but they are cleaned by the blood of Christ, and that's how we're washed. Our robes are washed white, as it mentions there in Revelation 7. They've washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb and made them white. So yeah, red's the shedding of blood. Now I'm going to read still in Exodus 28. Can I actually get someone to read Exodus 28, verse 15 to 21?
I'll have a go. Everybody's very quiet today.
Thank you, Ian.
What is it? 28 verses 15 to 21.
Yep, that's it.
You shall make the breastplate of judgment, artistically woven, according to the workmanship of the ephod you shall make it, of gold and blue and purple and scarlet thread, and of fine linen thread you shall make it. It shall be doubled into a square. A span shall be its length, and a span shall be its width. And you shall put settings of stone in it, 4 rows of stones. The first row shall be a sardius, a topaz, and an emerald. This shall be the first row. The second row shall be a turquoise, a sapphire, and a diamond. The third row a jacinth, an agate, and an amethyst. And the fourth row a beryl, an onyx, and a jasper. They shall be set in gold settings. And the stones shall have the names of the sons of Israel, 12 according to their names, like the engravings of a signet, each one with its own name. They shall be according to the 12 tribes.
Now, these, you'll notice a lot of the same colors and the same things that the woman in Revelation 17 was described as having, we see here with the priest. And these colors of purple, scarlet, gold appear throughout the sanctuary, and the sanctuary curtains were blue, purple, scarlet, and they had cherubim that were embroidered with gold thread. And here in the high priest's breastplate, again, you see that same blue, gold, purple, scarlet, but also all the precious stones that woman of Revelation 17 was also seeing. However, throughout the sanctuary, while we see the same purple, scarlet, gold, and precious stones that we saw in Revelation 17, there's one color, one thing mentioned in these sanctuaries service, the priest garments and the tabernacle itself and the curtains, that doesn't appear with the woman of Revelation 17, and that is the color blue. And I find that interesting, that the woman of Revelation 17 is described as having the same colors and the same descriptive features as a high priest, except not having any of the blue. And so I'm going to ask the question, what does blue represent? And can somebody read me Numbers 15, verse 38 and 39? And if someone can volunteer to read that and then tell us what the blue represents. Gayleen.
I always thought the blue represented obedience.
Yep. Do you want to read that out of Numbers?
So what was the reference again?
Numbers 15, verse 38 to 39.
15. So I went too far. 38 and 39.
Mm-hmm.
Speak unto the children of Israel and bid them that they make them fringes in the borders of their garments throughout their generations, that they put upon the fringe of the borders a riband of blue. And it shall be unto you for a fringe, that ye may look upon it and remember all the commandments of the Lord, and do them, and that ye seek not after your own heart and your own eyes, after which ye used to go a whoring. That was the verse I was thinking of. I just had no idea where it was.
Yeah. So the blue color represents, the commandments of God and obeying the commandments. It's interesting. Here I find, especially when we look at Revelation 17, it says that the blue was to remind us to obey the law of God and not go whoring after our own hearts and our own eyes. But in Revelation 17, we see a woman who's arrayed in all the colors and the stones of a high priest, except they've gotten rid of the blue, they've gotten rid of the law, and they've gone a whoring and committed fornication with the kings of the earth. And so this is just another, I suppose, another thing that highlights this woman as this religious power, this church that's fallen. It's still there. It's still, standing up, speaking, and teaching about the blood of Christ, about righteousness, about the royalty of God on His throne. But they've gotten rid of the law. They've gotten rid of the law, and it's interesting that, where blue was used in a lot of the sanctuary. For example, the mitre, the golden mitre that was on the priest's forehead with holiness to the law, it was attached by blue lace. And so when you get rid of the blue, that gold representing the holiness of the Lord can't stand there anymore. These things fall apart. And that's what we see happening here. This woman is sort of impersonating the priest. It has a false priestly ministry on earth, where while pretending to carry out the functions of a priest. They've gotten rid of the law and they've led people astray. And this is that same papal power that we've seen earlier on, the same religious power that is riding this image of the beast, that is deceiving the kings of the earth. Yeah, is instead a priestly power with no purity or fear of God. And while the high priest was to have holiness to the law on his forehead, while the 144,000 have the name of the living God on their foreheads, this woman has the name Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth, written on her forehead. So there we have our introduction to the description of this woman, of Babylon, the woman that rides the beast. Galen.
This might be a bit of a side note, or I might be going in completely the wrong direction. But I've always thought that's quite a lot to fit on a forehead. And I know obviously it's a description of character, but to me, it was always like, how are you going to fit all that on a forehead type situation?
Some people have big foreheads.
There is that, yeah. The one thing that kind of comes to mind is that our forehead is obviously where we live, as it were, where we make our judgments and our reasonings and our, I don't know, conscious choices, I suppose. Just wondering how much of her own reasonings, that allows all that to fit there, type of thing going on. But yeah, like I said, it completely left field, but hey.
Mm-hmm. Well, I suppose today we've really just looked at identifying the beast within the book of Revelation. This is this false religious church riding the image of the beast, and it's given a description of her character, or what's lacking in her character. Next time we'll go on from verse 7. The angel again speaks to John after he's seen this and described the woman, and continues to give more of a description to identify who this woman is, even more specifically. But for now, Ian, can I ask you to have a word of prayer for us?
Yep, no problems. Wonderful Father, thank you for the gift of prophecy. Thank you for giving us these messages, and for the faithfulness of people like John and Daniel and Joseph and many others who've been able to receive your messages and deliver them to your people. Must have really troubled him, and we see time and again these messages seem so hard to understand, but when we look back, we see a fulfillment, and it gives us joy that our Father wants to protect us, and he wants to show us that he hasn't forgotten, and there is a plan. I pray that each of us will seek your wisdom, Father, and thank you for Matthew's understanding and wisdom and research, and I pray that you'll continue to help him to strengthen. And I just pray for each person that's here today and those who couldn't make it. And thank you so much that we have the freedom to read your word still. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.